Hey everyone, what's up? And we are back after that amazing session from Shane. I think it was very insightful, and we are back for another session. But before we begin, I would like to thank all our sponsors, all our partners who have partnered up with us to make this event possible. I would also like to thank all our guest speakers who have been with us up till now and who will be with us in the next few sessions as well. I would like you all to sort of show some love to our speakers and the partners using the emojis. Let us know in the comment section how you're liking the event. If you have any feedback for us, please let us know, because obviously we want to become better. We want to do better events for you guys. So make sure that you drop your feedback in the comment section for us as well. Now we have a very interesting session for you all. It's called Why Good Enough Performance is No Longer Enough. And it will be presented by Georgi Petrov, who I would like to call up on stage. Now, you might have heard that name in the past associated with different performance tools, uh, with NitroPack, maybe with other different performance tools as well. But as soon as Georgi is on stage, I would like himself to introduce himself to the audience. So if I can have Georgi on stage real quick. Yeah, Georgie is here. Georgie, if you can really quickly introduce yourself and let us know what your background is and what do you do right now? What do you do to keep yourself busy? And then after that, you can just start off with the session without any delay.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the invite, and super happy to be here. So basically, like, I'm involved in the performance industry since 2013. When we started the first version of NitroPack, it ultimately grew into like a popular, initially SaaS, then WordPress focused solution, and now serving a big chunk of the active internet. And currently, I'm involved with a company called Uxify, which co-founded together with my partner Mikhail, and we're focused on user level optimization, monitoring, and AI on top of that. Yeah.
Thank you for that intro, Georgie. And for everyone else, Uxify is also our partner for this event. So thank you so much, Georgie and Uxify for being a partner for this event. So Georgie, your session is about performance is not enough. Good enough performance is no longer enough. Can you tell us a bit about what that session is and what will be discussed in this session?
Right. So the core of the session is thinking of performance through the very practical meaning of why performance matters, and then identifying what is the good performance for you and why actually it's much smarter if you have a website which has a business function, like it can be e-commerce, can be SaaS, can be even hosting. Like, why when we have this website you should look at performance from a growth perspective, from marketing perspective, rather than from technical perspective, and how to correlate it and connect it to the business outcomes. And this basically answers the question why good is not good enough, because most of the times what we're seeing with our customers is like we're seeing how actually they're striving to go to some crazy numbers of low LCPs and low IMPs because they're being outcompeted and they see how their users are reacting on this LCP.
Yeah, that sounds amazing, Georgie, and I won't let our audience wait more. So the floor is yours, Georgie. You can start off with your presentation.
All right. Share my screen. All right, so that's my deck. Okay, let's start with a little bit of history and actually understanding why we are here today in 2026 discussing still performance, when it has always been the topic, one of the big topics in web. So I will just briefly rewind to 2018 for like the members who were doing performance at that time. Please share, identify yourself, and share a funny story. I can just share that at 2018 there was no co-web vitals, there was no LCP, and there was no anything that actually mattered for real understanding the real user. That there was nothing out there. And in 2018, there was this saying propagated, like basically there was a common industry knowledge where tools like Pingdom, like Kissmetrics, or like a few case studies here and there saying that if your website is 3 seconds like or lower, that's super fast website. Basically 3 seconds was like the gold standard where everyone was striving for. That was at the time where basically the user patience was kind of at that time was like the lowest it could have ever been, but still it was like from the perspective of today was like very high. And at that time also there was no like a singular like uniform way to measure performance, and like some people were doing page load together with all the JavaScripts and everything that is loaded together, page load time. Other people were doing DOM content loaded and so on. So it was very, very, very basically a dispersed effort across different people, and that's why also generally the understanding of performance was not so high among website owners. And then luckily in 2020, we had the launch of Core Web Vitals, which I think a year later they went into their page P2. And that solved a couple of issues. So the first one is like a new standard appeared, which was an AOCP, and there was like the metric of largest contentful page. I'll have it on the next slide to explain to the new folks. But basically, we introduced an AOCP where this AOCP was considered to be the most reliable way to measure the perceived loading for any website. And why perceived loading is important? Because it's designed to be for the users, right? So when we optimize, we want to optimize for the users, and perceived loading was where everyone was striving for in this initiative. And 2.5 seconds was chosen. But another interesting thing that happened was like it was not an average, it was not a median, it was P75, which means that it basically measures the 75% of the fastest user page views. And the next, what happened after this launch is just history. Like it completely changed the performance industry, and then basically everybody started to understand the significance. Google highly propagated it through their efforts, performance and huge performance efforts across the industry. They're still ongoing, and moving up to 2026, we still use heavily these thresholds and these standards, which is great. Right. Yeah, that's right. GT metrics. I'm seeing just some of the comments and the questions. Like, yeah, you can run metrics directly. The thing is that so basically at that time GT metrics was also popular, and of course this was like even one of the best metrics tools, because it was like very, very powerful and running like good so-called synthetic tests with today's terms. And yeah, even if you people who remember from that time, there was a popular technique, because I heard the previous topic, one of the popular techniques was actually putting your images in sprites, right? Creating one big image and then moving it with CSS. All right, so going back to today, today we have a very interesting opportunity and situation to actually start thinking about performance from a completely new perspective. And this is what we have been doing in Uxify recently. Like basically, our whole value propositions is around the user, and focusing about how the user reacts on performance and other type of frictions, because right, performance is by definition, like the way it's organized currently, is like by definition negative metrics, but there are also other negative metrics which are also reuser metrics, and they are not directly performance related, but they're still frictions. So moving to 2026, we have still this general good threshold by Core Web Vitals of 2.5 seconds. But what changed in the last 6 years. So one of the things that changed is that more and more websites started to get under the 2.5 seconds threshold, which is great, amazing. But also something else changed, and I will share with you what changed in the next slide. But let me tell you, for the folks who are just joining, what is LCP? LCP is currently the most popular page wall performance metric, which is in use by website owners, agencies, tools. Like basically everyone uses LCP to measure how fast a page loads. And in very simple terms, LCP directly calculates the time and shows you the time of load of the largest element on the page. This could be the hero image, the headline, or like anything that is large enough to be insignificant enough on the page that can be considered an LCP. And this, to some extent, has, like, in our own studies, it has about almost 80% of direct correlation to perceived load. Still, there are 20-something% of LCP which does not directly correlate to perceived load. So think of like pages where they have multiple elements, like think of a grid where every image is the same, and it's like a big grid. Very often it will select the first element. So LCP has its own problems, but in 80% of the times, it's correct, right, to understand the perceived load. And if it is correct to understand the perceived load, which means that we can measure the user patience with it. But now there is a new challenge, which is the following. User patience is different across industries, across websites. It's different sometimes even within the same website across time. So depending on how you market the website and who actually is entering your website, from what type of device, what is their previous experience, like one of the big contributors of changing of the user perception of how fast the website is actually how fast is also your internet connection. Because if you're a user browsing for a very fast internet connection, you tend to expect every website to be fast, right? And that sees everything piling up into different cases where fast website actually means different for every website, for every audience. But right, still everyone in every industry and every website will still use 2.5, right? And that's a very good start, but I will share a bit more. What's the patience of your users is the biggest question here, and how to find it out. So in the next slide, basically, I will walk you through a decision matrix, which we use for our in our product and for our customers, which we have proven to be good enough to find opportunities for increasing like engagement, increasing revenue, and finding where exactly performance improvements matter. So before starting, we need to measure performance, right? And there is very often this case of, especially from the smaller sites and just joining and agents managing small sites, like very often a Lighthouse, which is like you can take it in variations. It can be within Google, it's free within Google DevTools, and it can be multiple tools on the internet that do the so-called synthetic test, which is basically Lighthouse, which is amazing. I mean, nothing bad about it, but it has one main use case. First is to be used on a staging website, and the second main use case, which is probably secondary, is to use, still you can use it on a production website, but only for the purpose of finding different deviations from like anomalies and changes. Now, the big point is, like, if you have a live website with real users, you want to look at your real user performance. right? So it's basically the same LCP, but the way that is being experienced by the real users. And the rest of my topic will focus on the real user experience. So advice here is, you have a staging website, go with Lighthouse. You have a live website, go with real user monitoring tool. That's it. That's the advice we go with. Okay, the first thing with decision matrix, like how fast I should go with my LCP. Like, what is a good LCP for me? The very start, you start with a 2.5 seconds baseline, right? That's the good enough performance of which Google suggests. If you're passing it, you basically moves you into the passing core web vitals, given that the other core web vitals are fine as well. This is the floor, like this is where you start with. If you're on more than 2.5 seconds, that's easy. You have work to do. I mean, it's easy to understand where you need to be heading. You have work to do. Get under 2.5 seconds. This is the first requirement that you need to cover in terms of LCP. Now it gets more interesting. Of course, this is the like you can use many tools, but like using the Crux data, this is the Google PageSpeed tool, where basically the first part of it is the important part, where it shows you what is the LCP and LMP and COS of your real users as measured from Google Chrome data. Right. Okay. So how fast I should go with LCP? Number 2, go and find out the industry average LCP. Like, you're in e-commerce, fine. You're in the US, selling in the US, great. You're selling like health products, fine, great. You are in this industry, you're competing with it. Go and find this industry average LCP. Like, there are tools, the real user monitoring tools, who offer this information already. We also have this information. You go and find, like, if 2.5 seconds is for every website, including the ones that are like not really relevant to you, go and basically understand what is your industry LCP. And it's a game of competition. So knowing where you stand with and what is the expectation for your industry is the first thing we need to know after the 2.5 seconds. More and more industries which are like more competitive are also very competitive on LCP. And if you're in a very competitive industry, the chances are that your LCP, industry average LCP, is a very much lower than 2.5 seconds. Yeah, right. That's an example of what a comparison to the industry would look like. It's from our tool. You can get it from any tool, of course. And that's on the industry. Now we move down the funnel, and now we look at specific competitors. So specific competitors are the ones, like, not in general all competitors, not necessarily the one that you share some customers with, although it's still super relevant. But the most relevant group of competitors are the one who you share traffic with, right? So this will be the ones that people will go and click, like on search or on like LLM search. They will find you, they will click a few other people, and they will start browsing with you. So these will be the ones who we're sharing traffic with, and they're the most relevant competitors. Why it's important to look generally in competitors and in industry is because your users aren't comparing you to the Google thresholds, they're comparing you to the last site they visited. And that's usually, if they're researching now, they're usually a site of a competitor or another site that might be faster enough. So you should be focused on that site. That's a tip, like one example how a competitor comparison might look like in your favorite run tool. And you can compare how you stand against them. Right. And now we get to the interesting part. That's finding your user LCP sensitivity. So that's something that is measurable, but is not super straightforward with the current tooling, right? Why it's not super straightforward? Because it involves multiple data points, and it involves platform specific knowledge, where most of the tooling are platform independent and so on, like platform agnostic. And in these cases, there are already some correlations available on the market, but in these cases, that's the most important way to look at LCP. If you look at it from the practical standpoint, from the business standpoint of what is a good LCP and how fast it should get. And I'll share with you a few examples from a customer of ours I just pulled before the presentation, and show you how this user sensitivity on LCP on your website actually makes the needle, and how it completely switches the question, moves the needle. Yeah. So first let's start with engagement and conversion. So when you start looking at your own real user data and how your users react, you will start seeing graphs like this. Like you can look how the page views per session are basically improving with the LCP, right? That's first engagement signal, like what should be your LCP. Second engagement, like you can look at how the LCP by pre-conversion from in this case by add to cart, how basically you get add to carts, more to carts with the better LCP, right? And then you see how basically you get more checkouts with the improved LCP. Similar correlation here, like checkout rate upside. That's, you see how checkout rate is different at different LCP levels. Like we are seeing here a data of I think about 2 million users, and that's a very good upside of what actually is achievable as a correlation of different LCP. And when you start monitoring this type of situations, you tend to understand the potential of looking and improving your LCP, right? And one bonus benchmark which you can look, and we also following very closely with different frictions and performance metrics, is how you are signaling different engagement, like for example, how you're signaling dwell time for SEO purposes with LCP. And here you see the distribution of LCP again by second and dwell time and the opportunity size there. And here also you see how your competitive landscape look like in terms of LCP and who you should be outranking here. And these are all suggested, like something I highly suggest for you to follow if you're optimizing for the bottom line on your website, and if you want to use the LCP and other performance metrics as growth levers compared to just for technical like quality of life optimization. And ultimately, you should end up with something that is target LCP, and that's where your target is. So basically, that's the decision matrix of how to think of LCP from the practical standpoint of improving your bottom line. Ultimately, your goal is to find the ideal LCP. Once you find it, it's very often much lower. Okay, sometimes less lower, but it's definitely lower than 2.5 seconds, the suggested ones. And that's why how fast is fast enough and why good performance is not good enough nowadays is a real question for decision making and for businesses. Right. And I'll give you a brief also matrix, which is rather suggestions we're giving it also something we also have as an optimization tool. So how do I get to my ideal LCP? So very often like mid-market brands and upper SMBs, they will have someone in-house who is in charge of performance. Might not necessarily be a dedicated role, but it could be in the web team or marketing team, who is one of the tasks he has is to deal with the performance. So usually this type of person is the first go-to person to actually go and try to talk and see what we can do about performance. Once we see the real user sensitivity and the competitors and the industry benchmarking, this data-driven approach is useful for a performance engineer or the person tasked to know where exactly and how exactly to look at most of the, like in Uxify, for example, we have a drill down with 100 plus segments where you can drill down and actually identify the groups, and have the AI agent on top where you basically can find where exactly is the issue with the LCP. And like that's the go-to strategy. This engineer sometimes might use like optimization tooling, and like for example, like in navigation AI of Uxify, NitroPack, our previous components, like amazing optimization tooling for WordPress. WordPress, another optimization tooling for WordPress. Cloudflare have bunch of rather generic type, but still very reliable optimizations, yeah, that all piles up together. Still, it's a good strategy to use someone who is aware of what needs to be done, like rather than going and applying multiple tools at once. It really gives the best results. Yeah, and nowadays we have a lot of AI agents who tend to more and more understand the code. We, for example, use a lot of AI in order to propose some meaningful fixes and to find hard-to-find situations where like would be require a performance engineer. Some of his tasks are actually taken by this AI agent, identifying weak points in performance based on the real user data. And for those of you who are just hearing the real user data and situation and wondering, why do I need that when I just can run a test and tell me the score? Well, the difference is big if you're running like a live website. It's a huge difference, and the main difference is that it's not only the website itself, the moving piece of the puzzle. There's a lot of moving pieces with network conditions, with VPN restrictions, like with like device power, internet's on and off for the users, like hopping on and off different locations. And all this is actually resulting in the real user experience, knowingly or unknowingly by the user. And you can do more. Like, for example, there is already certain very strong motions going in the user level optimization phase where we are involved, and basically keeping the user closer to you regardless of the environment. Yeah, that makes a big difference to actually optimize for the real user. And that basically focus in the real user and focus on the business first perspective of actually what does it mean for my engagement, for my user, for my website. They're all aligned. We ultimately, with this focus, we ultimately achieve the same thing. And it is making your user happy, right? Because if you're performing, if he's happy, if she is happy, she will continue this journey. If the button that is clicked immediately responds with visually, and then she tends to click more, and then she tends to return at a higher chance rate to your website, because she remembers that website was very, like, subconsciously remembers it just worked. And this all piles up together, and it basically fundamentally results into like higher engagement and more conversions, and it fundamentally changed the ownership of the performance task, right? Because like if from landing, the performance helps the users, like Uxify, like the journeys, how we call it, or basically improve the user experience of the journey, and this correlates directly to more successful journeys. That's now a business topic, right? That's now a business question. That's a management question. That's like how we are more successful with that, and that's might be on the marketing, that might be under growth, or any team that is tasked to make this website work. When it works for the user, it works for the business as well. So basically, we're changing the question from technical question to business question, and when correlating to engagement, conversions, and SEO. Right, that's all, folks. Thanks so much. If you have any questions, let me know. Hope it was interesting. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Georgi. This was fantastic. Very insightful. We have some questions in the chat as well that I would like you to answer. We have a few minutes, and we can use that to answer questions from the chat. So Veronica has a question, and she asks that how can we actually measure how LCP influences my revenue? So I will pin that on the screen so you can read it. It should be on the screen now. Can you see it?
No, I don't see it.
All right, let me just read it out. So it says, how can we actually measure how LCP influences my revenue?
All right. Yeah. So it's just basically using the real user data, and this user data already has the answer, right? So we already have the real user data. You just need to visualize it, and that's you use a real user monitoring tool. That's the easiest way. Just the user monitoring tool should support this visualization.
Awesome. I will now go to the Q&A section, and we have a few questions over there as well. Let me scroll down to see if we have any questions for your session specifically. I saw a few questions around LCP, and I wanted you to take those. So Hammam has a question. How can design systems? No, so sorry. Yashvi has a question. How do modern web technologies help developers exceed good enough performance standards?
Yeah. So there is a, how to say, modern technologies do not necessarily mean faster LCP, right? Because the motivation number one of every modern technology is to be easy to build, which is a slightly different motivation than performance for the visitor. And it's been like that for quite some time with all the frameworks, and now with all the vibe coding and things like this that is going on, and all the technologies that you pile up together. So when you pile them up together, you definitely optimize for your productivity to build this website. But performance is rather an optional add-on to these technologies, rather than and something that goes with them. So we've seen some modern, like for example, teams that is like we have one or two teams which they have put some constraints on their buildability, on their technology, but they have really produced a performance first team. We've seen that, and but generally the modern technologies in general, then they don't have performance as first priority in reality. Although their marketing might be saying something different, it's often not the case. Like performance usually goes and does not go together with easy to build, right?
All right, makes a lot of sense, Georgie. We will take the last question for your session, and then we will just wrap it up. The question is, Georgie, could the pressure to exceed good enough performance lead to unsustainable expectations for workers and organizations? And how should this be managed?
Yeah. So the first part of the question is, it might really be a bit tough, but it's usually like you need to understand why we're doing it and what do you need. So from there, it simplifies a lot of situations. So if the teams who are building it, they consciously know that they need to strive for that. They're willing to take tough decisions, like we don't want that big video here. We'll do something else, right? We don't want that big JavaScript, which is fine here. We'll do something else. And they, in this way, when they think technology first, like from performance first perspective, they're able to take the right decisions from the beginning of what is possible and what is not possible, because too many of the nice things that they want to do are actually not beneficial for performance.
All right. Thank you so much, Georgi. This was it from this session, folks. I would like to thank Georgi for being here and presenting a very insightful presentation and a demo. I'm sure a lot of people will take a lot from Georgi in this session around LCP and why it matters so much to your website and to your client's website based on what area of work you are in. So thank you so much, Georgi. This was it from this session. As for you folks, don't go anywhere, because right after this we have a rapid fire quiz. So if you missed out on the last activity, this might be your chance of redemption, and you might end up winning some amazing gift cards. So don't go anywhere.